Hello and welcome to Personality Crisis. My name's Dylan Ris, and we are lucky enough to be joined all the way from Mexico City by Jay Watts. Jay, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Pleasure
so
to be
Jay,
here.
you're part of an organization called Mexico. Hello and welcome to Personality Crisis. I am Dylan Ris, your host. And we are very lucky to be joined by Jay Watts from the Mexico Solidarity Project. Jay, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, Jay, we are curious about your group, which comes from the left side of Mexican politics. How you perceive what the Morena Party and the fourth transformation that they are embarking upon. How has the Morena Party, President Sheinbaum, how have they been able to counteract what's been a tradition of right-wing media coverage in Mexico, and how are they able to reframe the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's come to Mexico and experienced sort of popular media, mainstream media, is probably a little bit shocked about how right wing the corporate media can be. And I mean, it's probably a better situation now than it has been for decades. But one of the things that President AMLO introduced when he was when he came in as president were these morning press conferences, which could be between 3 to 4 hours. Where he introduces stuff, talks about stuff. I mean, politically, a very smart tool, because in the previous runs that he had in 2006 and 2012, the majority owned corporate media within Mexico just shut him out, like did not acknowledge that he was a candidate or give him or the party any space. So he introduced these press conferences, daily press conferences, where he was able to sort of set the agenda and have the corporate, and which is primarily right wing media, respond to him rather than him have to respond to them. Although there's always obviously a space for them, and it still continues within Sheinbaum, who has reduced them a bit. They're about 2 hours now instead of 3 to 4 hours. She goes on the mañanera del Puebla, the people's morning. So in the same regard, she's able to sort of bring up issues, to immediately discuss issues, have questions directed at her from the corporate media, right wing media still is able to question her on things, but it's certainly a lot easier to control the narrative on certain issues when you're able to respond to something right away, or even present another issue daily, than have to do it weekly, or whenever there's some issue that seems big enough to demand a press conference. Fortunately or unfortunately, Mexican politics are very, very active, so there probably is a need, anyways, every day to have a press conference. But I think that it's a very smart way to communicate beyond the mainstream media, and to the extent that President AMLO and Sheinbaum herself are some of the largest streamers, in the sense, in Latin America, if not the world, because of these daily press conferences that you go into restaurants or workplaces, and the TV will be on, or YouTube will be streaming with the president speaking about what's happening every day. So it's a very strong way to communicate and to deliver information about what's happening within the country.
So it's coming through in different media, traditional broadcast TV, YouTube, social media. It's consumed.
Yeah, and
Throughout,
it's and
throughout
it's
all
and
this.
it really does set the agenda. That one of the things that we do primarily on our website is translate articles from the Mexican press about things that we think are interesting to people, and a lot of stories do originate from the press conference, whether it's covering something she mentioned, or one of the other cabinet ministers, and then people following up on it. So it really does sort of let the government, which comes from the left and has sort of an antagonistic relationship with corporate media, lets it get its message out.
That website again, that's mexicosolidarity.com. If you are interested in uh, current events in Mexico, not a Spanish speaker, Jay and his team have you taken care of, and you can read directly about those events. Now, have you observed changes in other media? The corporate media, some legacy outlets, or otherwise. Have you noticed any ability um, to shift the narrative on those networks, or are they entrenched in what they're doing?
Yes and no. I think it's hard to tell too, because there's a certain element with even within the worst sort of like corporate media, Foxy News kind of thing or whatever here, which this didn't exist in Canada, at least for myself, which is like maybe more in Mexico. No, but it exists in other cities. Like they cover protests, like
Mm-hmm.
like if there's something happening within the city, they'll send somebody there. They'll say this is what they're protesting about, et cetera, et cetera. So that sort of already existed. But in terms of the space for the left, you definitely see a lot more commentators who would be considered Morena aligned on sort of the table, the chat shows, talk shows, things like that in major corporate media. Sometimes they're ganged up on, sometimes it's not, but it's I think it's definitely a lot larger than it was when AMLO first came in.
Mm.
But I think there's another thing here too, which doesn't exist as much in Canada and the United States, which is that and we work a lot with, which is the newspaper La Jornada, which is a daily newspaper, which comes from the left, which has obviously support for Morena, but also voices a lot more critical from further from the left. It's a daily newspaper that comes out. A lot of people read it. That communication device is still, people still here read newspapers and things like that. That communication device is very, very important. Obviously, they have a website and do that stuff too as well. But so there's that, and there's also smaller public television stations such as Canal 11, which members of Soberanía podcast have a television show on as well, and 14, which is the Mexico City public television station. So there's a lot of outside of the mañanera, there's other areas of communication that the left within Morena and outside of Morena uses and utilizes to reach out to people.
To what degree do social media influencers further disseminate the message, or is that not as much of a phenomenon in Mexico? In the United States, a lot of people are abandoning all forms of newspaper and television and getting stuff from online personalities who aren't connected to traditional reporting.
Yes, they do. I think like AMLO and Morena began cultivating relationships with what you would consider influencers and stuff like that, politically, to get out the message. I don't know if it's entirely a good thing all of the time as well. I think that there's, I mean, this is just the situation with the government that's been in power, and that is hegemonic, right? For, for 8 years, now, is that, people who would, I guess there's something within Mexico called the political class, or, professional people who maybe are not politically inclined because they have a burning desire about certain issues, but because they want a political career. So that also happens in influencers, middle class people or whatever, who have the time and money to come to the morning press conferences, and maybe their contribution is not the best necessarily. But yeah, those exist here as well. And they clip things, they put it on TikTok or Instagram and YouTube and Facebook, which is a pretty significant usage of Facebook in Mexico.
Mm-hmm. How has the messaging changed as the 2027 elections draw closer, or has it remained? Have we not gotten fully into?
No, curse the United States for their they're introducing this idea of mobilizing for the midterms right away, campaigning for them. No, that is a big issue. I mean, I think if we got into it a little deeper, how Morena is looking at the CIA Chihuahua incident is okay. We're not going to pick a fight with the United States over it. we are going to politically orient the 2027 election. That we have this issue with the CIA, with a governor from the right-wing PAN party, and that we're going to mobilize towards an impeachment, which they've announced, which probably won't be able to go through. So they've announced a march against her, and so they're trying to use this sort of event as being as relating it to the 2027 elections. This also happened with. Sorry.
For our listeners who don't know about the CIA Chihuahua incident, what should they know?
Very quickly, there was a sort of a drug bust that happened in the mountainous areas of Chihuahua. It turns out there was two for sure CIA, 4 American foreign nationals, along with this drug bust. No, there's not any specific. They're still investigating right now with what the extent of their involvement was. They ended up dying. We found out because they ended up dying in a car accident. Ostensibly, allegedly died in a car accident. And so this is a big issue because the national security law that came in 2020 says that foreign agents such as the CIA or DEA or MI6 or anybody else can only be operating in the country with the approval of the government, the federal government, and that was not the case.
And so this has become a salient 2027 electoral issue.
Yes, and also there's a thing about electoral reform, basically changing. We have a system of proportional representation here, changing the allocation of proportional seats and public financing, et cetera, things like that. There's a conflict with the minority parties within the coalition, the Green Party and the Workers' Party, and so that also became part of connecting it to 2027 and became an issue too. So there is sort of a move towards orienting issues towards 2027, towards those elections.
What are some ways that you would like to see the Mexican left even further improve their communications and their ability to control the narrative? Or steer the narrative. Control might be.
Yeah, I mean it's a good question. I don't want to come back too much, but I think that there has been a sort of like shell-shocked nature of like how we're dealing with the relationship with the United States, and that comes down to the USMCA. Is that there was supposed to be a lot of consultations with certain groups within the trade unions, social organizations with the Mexican government about approaching USMCA. Those were canceled. So the left, I think, which I would say within Morena itself right now is strong on certain issues, like Cuban solidarity is not so strong on the USMCA negotiations. So I think there has to be, but it's hard too, right? Because there's also the narrative that we're under attack by the United States right now, that it's important to maintain a sense of unity in the face of that attack. So maybe there's not as much space for criticism within Morena. It obviously exists outside of Morena. So I think the big thing is for the left within Morena and without to use the existing tools that exist, the things like La Jornada, but maybe the necessity is to develop a website, things like that, some other organs that are able to cover what's happening. I mean, I'll speak for myself. Mexico is a very, very active, very large country with a lot of stuff going on. Unfortunately, and I'm guilty of this as well, a lot of the news and coverage of politics tends to be Mexico City centric, even though that's not necessarily how, how current affairs are happening and the politics are happening in the country. But it's just because we have a very centralized state.
And for those who want to know more about, the state of Mexican politics, how we got here, the nature of the USMCA, the relationship with the current Trump administration, we have another podcast with Jay that encourage you all to check out, where we go into greater depth on all of those issues and where the Mexican left might orient related to left-wing movements in the United States, Canada, and other countries in that USMCA conglomerate, which is sort of in a state of limbo as we wait to see how negotiations will go. Jay, is there anything else that you want us to know about, Mexican Solidarity movement or anything that's upcoming on the political front among these countries.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's if people have any interest in sort of Mexican politics and live in the United States or are Mexican themselves, I think it's the Mexico Solidarity Project is developing chapters, solidarity chapters, which will operate in cities in the United States. Because I think, I mean, one of the issues that we didn't discuss, but very quickly, is the review of the 53 consulates that are currently providing services for Mexican citizens within the United States. Obviously, there's a really big issue with the deaths that have happened in ICE custody. I think it's up to 15 or 16 from Mexican citizens right now. And this is being driven by a sort of right-wing conspiracy theory, which is that these Mexican consulates are sort of sleeper cell political organizations that are attempting to overtake the United States. If only, but
Yeah.
obviously this is not correct. But I think we have to look at this as a larger attack on both Mexican sovereignty, but also a progressive left wing Mexican neighbor, and that these attacks will only diminish the ability of the U.S. left as well to operate. So I think that there's a lot that both the U.S. and Canadian left can learn from Mexico, and vice versa, that the Mexican left can learn from the U.S. and Canada, and that whatever is coming up in the last 2.5 years of the Trump administration is probably going to require a little more collaboration and work together than we've had for a little while.
So there's these conspiracy theories from the American right wing about what the Mexican consulates are secretly up to. What's the domestic criticism of the consulates? Is it that they aren't fighting back hard enough against mistreatment of Mexican nationals, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a sort of let's say the popular opinion within Mexico is that things like the Secretariat of External Relations, which is responsible for consulates and stuff like that, has a civil service that is a little connected to the previous administrations, that doesn't want to deal with migrant justice or things like that, is more interested in business deals and things like that. So that they're not offering enough services. I don't know enough to judge whether that's accurate or not, but I do know that to lose any number of those consulates could be a very dangerous situation as we're going into further ICE raids and things like that. As it doesn't look like that's going to be slowing down at all. So,
well, that's something for the American listeners to keep track of, because those consulates may be close to where you live. Well, Jay Watts, this has been a terrific discussion. We encourage everyone who's interested to listen to our other episode with Jay, and to visit the websites MexicoSolidarity.com and MexicoSolidarityProject.com. Jay also has his own website, j-watts.com, if you want to learn more about what he is up to. And thank you so much for your time, Jay. This was really illuminating conversation.
Thank you. Nice to talk to you, Dylan.